Mark Daniely is the horticulture agent, and he will be doing our fall lawn care program today. And we will begin now.
Okay. And so as we go along, if you have a question, if you put that in the chat box, and Chris can kind of moderate that, and we can go through the questions at the end. So lawn care is way more complicated than what you would think it would be. You see advertisements about how simple it is, and you use this product or that product, and it's really much more complicated than that. The typical Master Gardener lawn care class is at least 3 hours, and that really doesn't cover everything. So what we're going to try and do this morning is just give you sort of the highlights and give you some tips and tricks, things that will be helpful for you in thinking about your lawn. And then certainly Chris and I are available to answer any other questions you may have as you get into it. So we'll sort of start talking about, what's the best turf for the site? And it really boils down to, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to have the golf course quality lawn, which you can do around here? It's going to cost you a lot of money. Or are you just happy to have something green to mow, and that's a different thing altogether? So there's a lot of factors to consider. Now, if you got shade, you probably just can't have grass. There's a lot of things to talk about to decide, what do you really want to accomplish. We'll start talking about soil. So, we have some challenges with our soil. If you've got a red soil, it's going to be a low pH, low phosphorus. That has to be corrected in order to get decent grass to grow. And a lot of our problems come from construction. So, they're building your home and they're driving the tractor across the ground when the ground's wet and the soil gets compacted. And rarely does that compaction ever get corrected when they're sowing the grass. And so then you got a soil that's really not very conducive to growing good quality turf. So they can aerate or aeravate, and sometimes that will help. Sometimes, depending on what you're going for, you may actually have to go back and start from scratch in order to really get a good lawn if that's what you're interested in. So you sort of see here, you've got the situation where you've got the grass on the left. It's got a good deep root system there. It's a loose soil. And of course, with a good root system, you get good top growth. With the picture on the right, we've got a very compacted soil, very little root growth, very little top growth. So that's the problem we run into, is compacted soil is going to be a real issue in growing good quality turf. So typically what the people have done for years is use a core aerator. So before that, we had spikers, and spikers just poked holes in the yard, and it was better than nothing, but wasn't as good as core aerator. So the core aerator actually pulls a plug up out of the soil, which does loosen the soil up and is very helpful. The newer technology now, I guess, is what they call the aerator. So this machine has solid tines, but it is PTO driven. So as you're going across the yard with the PTO on, it shatters the soil surface. So you can see the area where the PTO is on, and it's shattered the soil, so it shakes the soil, breaks it up. But if it's not turned on, then it just rolls across the ground. The advantage in this is, as we get into September and start to work on the yard, a lot of times we're really dry and the ground is really hard. And under those circumstances, the core aerator won't work. It'll just bounce on top of the ground, where the aerator will work. So a lot of our lawn care companies are going to the aerator just because they can get into the ground when it's hard and dry, as opposed to the core aerator, which won't. Aerator does a pretty good job of reducing soil compaction. Probably not as good as a core aerator, but it will work in hard ground. Okay, so if you're really going to do it, you get one of these guys in here, brings in a tractor. He's got this PTO tiller, and he's breaking up the soil down to a depth of 6 to 8 inches. coming behind with a hand tiller. You can see the guy's footprints. You see him sinking down there. I mean, he's really getting this soil torn up very well. You do have to go back, however, after he's done, and then walk this back down. So it's got to be firm in order to sow the grass seed. It doesn't need to be compacted, but you can't leave it fluffy like this because it'll settle unevenly and it'll be real rough. So we're going to till it all up and then pack it back down lightly to get a good seed bed. But that's the ideal way if you really want to start over and get a good quality turf. We'll take a minute or two to talk about soil pH, soil sampling. So you kind of see here on this chart where between pH of 6 and 6.5 is kind of our sweet spot where we have nutrients available that we want. Got to turn my phone off. Okay. And then as you get into higher pHs, you can see here where things like manganese becomes less available. Low pHs, you see how the aluminum becomes more available. So we can get into a situation with an aluminum toxicity at low pH. So we need to neutralize the acidity in the soil in order to have these nutrients be available in the quantities that we want. So to do that, we're going to add lime to neutralize the soil acidity. And of course, that's going to give us a good healthy root system, which is going to give us a better plant. So you can add lime powder or pellet. It's going to raise the pH up. Dolomitic lime adds some magnesium, which is helpful. And what you do have to think about is if you're just putting this on top of the ground, 50 pounds is the most you can do at any one time. So I have seen soil reports come back that ask for 150 or 200 pounds of lime per 1,000 square feet. You really can't apply that much at one time because the lime is not very soluble. It takes a while to work its way into the soil. So if you have a recommendation like that, ideally you would till the soil up to add that lime, or you could just do multiple applications. So put on an application in September, come back maybe January, February, and you could do 50 pounds at a time. It'll take you, a year or two to get it where you need to be, but you can certainly do that, and that's not a problem. Now, one of the things that you'll find, and that we'll talk about mostly, is that the products that are sold for lawn care, the labeling is misleading at best. So it's very, very confusing. So you got this product here, so Solulime. It says 1 50-pound bag is as effective as 5 40-pound bags of pellet lime. Okay, well, now that's easy to say, but I always like to look at the fine print. Is that really true? Well, you look at the back of the bag, and it says it takes 1,980 pounds of this to equal to 1 ton of standard lime. Well, that being the case, then 1 50-pound bag of that is not anyway as effective as 200 pounds of pellet lime. It's virtually the same thing, so it's going to be 50 for 50. So my recommendation is I wouldn't buy this. It's going to be very expensive, and you look at the label and it tells you right there, it's just not more effective. Now, it may be where it reacts faster, because you can see here where 90% passes a 200 mesh screen. So it's very, very fine. So it may react faster, but it's not going to be as effective as 200 pounds of standard lime. And you're going to pay a price for this. Then they've got a fast acting lime here. Maybe it is, because it may be a little bit finer mesh, but you go on to here and it's a little hard to see, but in North Carolina, it takes 2,000 pounds of this to equal 1 ton of standard lime. So it's pretty much the same. 2,000 pounds is a ton. So you're paying a pretty big price for a fast-acting lime when it really is no better than our standard lime material. And if you're taking a soil sample on a fairly regular basis, then you really shouldn't have to worry about, immediate results. You can wait 3 or 4 months, whatever it takes to get your pH back right, and not have to spend a whole lot of extra money on a lime product like this. So you could buy this standard pelletized dolomitic lime and do the same thing as these high price products. You have to wait just a little bit longer, but you can definitely save some money, and I think it's fine. This is what we've done for years and years and years. It's been very effective. These new fast-acting soluble limes are fairly new in the market, and I think it's a marketing thing, just a way to take some more of your money, but not really, in my opinion, that big of an advantage. Okay, so actually this here, so this Weaver limestone, it only takes 1,814 pounds of this to make a ton of lime. So this is a really good product here. So I would say, yeah, I use that, save myself $1 and still get the results that you're looking for there. We'll talk a little bit about fertilizer. So you should know that when you see a bag of 10-10-10, that means that the contents are 10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 10% potassium. So that NPK is a nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So 30% of this bag are nutrients for the lawn. The other 70% is just a filler. So it could be a sand, it could be lime, it could be whatever. It's just a filler. So 30% of that bag is actual nutrients, with 70% being filler, but that's just to make it spread a little bit easier. But you need to understand the analysis, because it is real important when you start to fertilize your lawn. And one of the problems we run into here is you go to a box store and they have got dozens of different products there, real slick packaging and marketing there. And it is very confusing unless you work with this a lot to know, what do you use and when do you use that. And I'm going to try to sort of clear up some of these misconceptions. So you look at these two Scotch products here. You got a Southern Turf Builder and a Super Winterizer. The Southern Turf Builder has an analysis of 26-13. So it's 20% nitrogen, 2% phosphorus, 13% potassium, with a Super Winterizer of 24-3-12. So you look at those numbers, they're virtually identical. So the grass doesn't really know the difference between those two products. You could use either one of those and doesn't make any difference. There's no reason to buy Southern Turf Builder and Super Winterizer. Pick either one of them and go with that if that is what your soil report tells you. What you'll see here is that both of these are very low in phosphorus. That middle number is phosphorus. Our soil tends to be deficient in phosphorus. You may have a soil report comes back that says you need to have a balanced fertilizer like a 10-10-10 or 17-17. You need some phosphorus in your soil for good grass growth. But these products have such a small number, they actually may not be what you want at all. So they might be, your soil report's going to tell you what you really need, but these two products are the same. So there's no reason to buy both of these. It's just a marketing ploy. So what you're looking for is a soil test report. I know this is kind of hard to see, and this is something that Chris and I can help you with. So if you take a soil sample and the report comes back and you're not really sure what it tells you, we can help interpret the results. We can look it up online. What it's telling you up here is giving you a pH reading here, and I think it's 6, so it doesn't need any lime there. Over here on the fertilizer recommendations, the phosphorus is adequate, so is the potassium. So what it's telling you here is all you need is nitrogen. So down here we got a 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet of a 2100 ammonium sulfate, I think. So we can have situations very commonly where you've used a complete fertilizer for several years. Our phosphorus, potassium levels are adequate. You do not need to add any more of those nutrients. You can just buy a straight nitrogen fertilizer. That's all the grass will need to grow well and be perfectly fine. It works very, very well. Okay, so there's a fertilizer recommendation there with the little circle on it. So, you can buy a straight nitrogen fertilizer like this. Is Super Kickers, a 34% nitrogen fertilizer. When you start to do the math, this ends up being about 82 cents per pound of actual nitrogen in the bag. If you were going to use a 10-10-10 fertilizer with that analysis, that would require 100 pounds of this fertilizer to give you 1 actual pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So the basic recommendation for fertilizing alone is you want to add 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So that's a standard recommendation, and depending on what product you use will be how much of that material you'd use. So for 10-10-10, that's going to be 100 pounds. For this 34% stuff, you only need 30 pounds to still get you that 1 pound of nitrogen. And so you can see the difference in price there. So about 26 bucks to use a 10-10-10, and $8.50 for a 3400. So if your soil report says you've got enough phosphorus, enough potassium, you can use a straight nitrogen fertilizer like that. It's all that the grass needs, and you can save some money. Now, these prices are from a couple of years ago. I'm sure the prices have changed, but it's still going to be similar as far as the money that you can save by using a straight nitrogen fertilizer if, in fact, your phosphorus and potassium is adequate. Okay. So that's all that's to say. The soil testing is super important. It's going to tell you what's in your soil, so you're not guessing as to what to apply. The soil test is free. It's done by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. We have the soil test boxes and information sheets here in our office. So our office is locked, but the foyer is open. You can come in, get some soil test boxes, get the information sheet, take your samples, mail them down to Raleigh, and the report will come back in probably about 2 weeks' time. And again, Chris and I can help you interpret the report and tell you what you really need to apply to your grass to make it grow very well without having to spend extra money or do something that just won't be helpful at all. We do want to follow the soil test recommendations for fertilizer. Normally, we would fertilize September, November, February. And that can vary depending on what the weather's like. So, I mean, if you had to push it back into like a October, December, March, it's okay. All of those things are a little bit flexible. And there are several different nitrogen sources here that you can use that are available. So it just depends on what it is that you need for your lawn. But the soil test report is going to be really the thing that's going to tell you what your grass needs in order to really grow very well. And quickly on rates, and we can still help you with this too. So we're always trying to go for 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. And so it's fairly simple, is you divide 100 by the percent of nitrogen, and that gives you the rate. So for a 10-10-10 fertilizer, you would need 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Triple 17, about 6 pounds. You go down to a 30%, about 3.3 pounds. And now if you are a little bit under, a little bit over, it's okay. It's not going to be that big a deal. This is a rate that you need to kind of shoot for there. Of course, in order to do that, you do have to calibrate your spreader, which that is a little bit trickier. So you need to know a square footage area. So ideally, you can go out there into some spot in your yard and lay off some particular area that you can measure and know that it is 1,000 square feet. And when you do that, then you can take, we'll say for a 10-10-10 fertilizer, you'd use 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet. You mark off that area, and the way I do it is I use 2 5-gallon buckets, and I'll take a 50-pound bag of 10, 10, 10, split that in half, so that gives me 2 25s. Then I'll split it in half again, so I got a 12 and a half. That's pretty close to 10 pounds. I'll pour that 12 and a half pounds into my spreader. You know, I'll kind of guess at the opening for the gate, and I'll spread that over that 1,000 square feet. If I run out before I get through, then I'm putting that too much. I need to close the gate down. If I have some left over, I can open it back up. And it's okay if you're under or over a little bit there, but by doing that 1,000 square feet, it gives you an idea of the calibration for your spreader. Then you can do the rest of the yard without having to worry about either having too much or not enough. So not super complicated, but it does take a little bit of time to get a calibration there to make sure that you're actually applying, you know, what you need. Okay, we'll start talking about grass itself. So we're in a transition area here. So, you know, it's too hot for cool season grasses to do very well here, and it's too cold for warm season grasses. So, you know, you have the St. Augustines and some of these things just don't do that great here. Bermuda is probably our best warm season grass if you wanted to do that. So it really is a choice of, you know, when do you want to have green grass, and then how do you manage that turf once it's established. For the most part, we're going to talk about cool season grass. So for us here, fescue, Kentucky bluegrass mix is going to do best. You're going to have more months of green grass with cool season grass here than you would versus using a warm season grass like Bermuda. We can do Bermuda here. You can overseed in the fall with a ryegrass, have green grass 12 months out of the year, but it's an extra step to keep that going, and some folks don't want to do that. So, you know, it's your choice whether you want to go cool season or warm season, but mostly I'm talking about cool season grasses will have the most months of good green grass with the cool season. This chart is going to help you as far as the mowing height. So you can sort of see here, there is a definite relationship between root growth and shoot growth. So as you've got good root growth, you've got good shoot growth. So where people tend to mow their grass real short, it ends up suppressing root growth. So if you're mowing your tall fescue at 1.5 inches or something like that, that allows a lot of weeds to come in. That short mowing height suppresses root growth, which causes drought issues. So really what we're shooting for here on a tall fescue is to mow it probably at least 3.5 inches tall to encourage good root growth, help suppress some weeds. It's going to be happier if in fact it's mowed at a higher height. So as mowing height increases, roots increase. So mowing height decreases, depth of root decreases. So we're really trying for tall fescue to keep it up there, 3.5, 4 inches. It's going to be happier. It's going to help suppress weeds. It's going to have better root growth. It's really going to do much better than mowing it real close, like some people have a tendency to do. Okay, so still talking about grass seed here. So we've got two terms to be familiar with. You've got a blend. So a blend is going to be a combination of 2 or more cultivars of the same species. So it's going to be 2 or 3 different tall fescues all together. That's a blend. There are situations where we'll use a mixture. So a mixture is going to be 2 or more species. So tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, fine fescue. So if you have got a full sun situation, you can use a blend of different improved tall fescue varieties. If you have a yard that's either got half sun, half shade, or mostly shade, under that circumstance, you're going to want to have a mixture that has tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. The Kentucky bluegrass is going to be more tolerant to shade than the tall fescue. So by using this mixture, you're going to have a little bit better results than what you would have if you used all tall fescue. So it could have fine fescues, some creeping red fescues. So some of these shade mixtures will have several different types of seed in it, and it works pretty well. You do have to understand, though, that once you get to 50% or more shade, you're going to have a real hard time growing a good turf, because for the most part, our grasses are going to be a full sun plant. They do sell some shade mixtures, but there's a limit to how much shade these grasses will take and still be able to grow. Okay, so we're going to seed our tall fescue about 6 to 8 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and that's going to be for a brand new lawn. So bare ground, you'd go that kind of rate. If you're doing an overseeding, it's probably going to be half of that. So again, our fertilizing is going to be Labor Day, Halloween, Valentine's, so September, November, February, but you can move those days around a little bit there, and we're still shooting for that 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. Okay, so we'll talk about seed labels here. So this is another area. So, lime is confusing, fertilizer confusing, seed labels are very confusing. So this is the information that you'll find on the label: the name of the seed, what's the germination, what's the inert matter, other crop seed, weed seed, noxious weeds. All of this information is going to be on the label, admittedly in very small print. They don't really want you to look at this, but this is like reading the labels at the grocery store. You need to know what's in your grass seed before you buy it, because you can make a mistake and buy something you really don't want. So we'll look at some labels just to give you an idea. Again, we're back to the box store with dozens and dozens of different seed choices there. You can't go by the packaging, the brand names. You really got to look at the label to see what it is in the seed bag. You may have seen this sometimes. Sometimes this comes in the Sunday morning insert in the paper, grassology. So this is like the perfect grass. So no watering, no mowing, no fertilizing, no weeding. Whew, this stuff is fantastic. It's super expensive. And if you go to look at the label, you'll see it's a bunch of different types of grass seed in here. But the other thing to see is it's Go and Grow coating. So half of this bag is some kind of coating on the seed. So you're paying a big price for seed coating that really does not give you any advantage at all. So it seems like this is a real expensive way to sow grass, and the claims are misleading at best. Okay. So Kentucky 31 is standard around here for a long, long time. Nothing wrong with this grass seed. You can see where it talks about, here's the purity of the seed, how much crop seed, inert matter, weed seed, germination, 85%. 85% germination is the state law in North Carolina. So it's got to be a minimum 85% germination to be sold. And noxious weed seeds, there's none. So that's good. So noxious weeds are something you don't want in your yard. That can be a real problem. Here's a Pennington, Kentucky 31. We'll look at this and you go, oh. So noxious weed seed. So this is on the label, required by law. They've got duck, plantain, hairy chest, sheep sorrel. You can tell by the name, these are weeds you do not want in your yard. They're extremely hard to control. And so if you bought this seed, you now have seeded your yard with weed seed. And so you have shot yourself in the foot already here. So you looked at the label, oh, premium, that seems good. Let's just go ahead and buy that. It's probably at a good price, but you got noxious weed seed in here. So when this starts to germinate, not only will you have some fescue, but you've got some noxious weeds to deal with there. That's going to really be a problem to deal with going forward. Scotch Southern Gold. Here again, you look at the label here, got some good varieties. This is a blend of tall fescues. These are good varieties. There's a list of recommended tall fescue varieties here, and these are those. So this is a good seed here. Very little other crop seed, very little weed seed, no noxious weeds. So yeah, you can roll with this. You look at that label and see what's in there. And that's not a problem at all. Here's a landscaper's mixed good for sun and shade. Well, you know, take that with a grain of salt. It won't do but so good in the shade. When you look at this one, you see germination here of 75%. This is actually illegal to sell this seed in North Carolina, but I did find it in a store. So has no noxious weed seeds. I mean, yeah, you know, I guess it's okay, other than the fact you got low germination there. You'd have to seed it at a high rate. Here's a Rebels tall fescue, another blend here. Very little other crop seed, very little weed seed, good varieties of tall fescue, 90% germination. So that's a good grass seed. So you read the label and you get a good idea of what it is that you're actually buying. You're going to pay more for a good quality grass seed, but it's going to be worth it. If you buy a cheap seed that has noxious weed seed in it, you're not going to be very satisfied with what you got at the end of the day. Here's a top choice. This is a white coral seed. White corals comes out of Garner, North Carolina. Typically, they have a very good seed. So you've got good recommended varieties here, 90% germination, very little other crop seed, other weed seed, no noxious weeds. So this is a super good grass seed right here. You're going to pay more for it. But, you know, if you're going to spend however many $100 to overseed your lawn, don't cheap out on cheap grass seed. You'll not be satisfied in the long term. Okay. Then when to plant. So we're getting into the time now that's a good time to plant. They're saying through mid-October. Quite frankly, I would not be opposed to seeding here well into December. The further you go, the less success you're going to have. So a lot of people will do spring seeding, and you're just not going to have good luck in spring seeding. April, May, you know, it'll germinate fine, but it doesn't have time to get established before summertime comes. And even with irrigation, you can still lose some of this grass just to hot weather. But this is cool season grass. I would much rather sow fescue in December than I would April anytime. We'll always have some nice weather, Christmas or in January. We'll have a week or so when it's up in the 60s, that grass seed will germinate, and you're still going to have a better luck having grass seed sowed then than you will in April or May. So renovation is what most people will do. So if you've got some bare spots in your yard now, you've had some weeds, you've had some brown patch disease that kills some of your lawn, then you're going to do some renovation here. A lot of this deterioration is caused by, you know, just poor management. It could be that you've got some disease infestation, so brown patch is super common on tall fescue. But in any case, you know, if you've got some areas of your yard that just aren't looking how they should, then you can do a renovation here. If you've got a situation like this where there's more weeds than there is grass, then you may need to spray out the weeds before you overseed. If it's just a few weeds, then you don't necessarily have to do that. But a situation like this, you may want to spray that out. So for that, we're going to use a non-selective herbicide like a glyphosate, which would be a Roundup or a generic Roundup. There's no real waiting period after you use these products. They don't have any activity in the soil. But you do need to have some lead time to do that to make sure it actually got a good kill. So if you've got Bermudagrass, then you pretty well missed your window for control on that. That should have started probably by the 1st of August. But for some of the broadleaf things, you could go ahead and get those done now and still have a pretty good chance of having good control and still have a good time to do renovation. So like I said, on the glyphosate from Bermudagrass, you got to start early because you may have to have multiple applications to control that before you can overseed. So if you have Bermudagrass and want to get rid of that, then I would say just wait till next year. You really can't get a good enough kill now to be successful at this late in the season. Okay, so we're going to do some renovation things here. We want to get rid of some of the weeds that may be there. We need to know how much lime and fertilizer to apply, and we do need to have a decent seed bed too. So when we apply this lime and fertilizer, we do need to make sure that we do get established uniformly. You don't have stripes in the lawn. So we used to use these drop spreaders that just did not spread the lime and fertilizer very well. And so you need to use a good rotary spreader and try to be as uniform as you can to spread the fertilizer. You know, ideally, you would go in 2 different directions. So you can go kind of east and west and then go back north and south to get a more uniform coverage. That's hard to do in some cases, but if you could, then that's ideal to get a good uniform spread of your nutrients. So in very small places, you could loosen the top few inches with a rake or a shovel and seed that way. If you're going to do a bigger area, all the yard in a core aerator or an aerator is going to be the way to go. The trick with using the core aerator is you need to go over the yard several times. So one pass is not going to do it. Your hole is going to be 6 or 8 inches apart. You need to go over it several times in order to get a lot of holes in there to make this really work for you the way it's supposed to. As I said earlier, if you're going to do the core aerating, the soil has to be moist. So if the soil is dry and hard, this won't work. This will just kind of bounce on top of the ground. It's not going to be effective at all. So the soil has to be moist in order to make this work. And the cores allow our lime fertilizer to get down into the soil, which is very, very helpful. So we're back to our picture of our core aerator there with the hollow tines. You sort of see here a little bit where it's actually pulling plugs up out of the yard, and that is opening up holes for lime fertilizer and oxygen to get down into the soil. Your plugs will look something like this if your soil is moist, and get you a good 3 or 4 inch plug, ideally. And so you can sort of see here in the middle picture of what's happening in. So we're opening up holes into the lawn, a lot of nutrients to get down into the root zone, air, water. It's going to help reduce some compaction there. So that's what we're trying to go to with our core aerator, end up with a better root system and happier turf. Aerator, here's our picture of that. So that's an option for hard ground there, where the aerator will break up the soil surface there. Probably not quite as good on reducing compaction, but you know, if we have a really hot and dry September, core aeration is probably not going to work unless you've got some way to water the lawn. You're just not going to have much success with that at all. Okay, so then we know we're trying to prepare the seed bed. You know, we talked about how to choose the kind of grass that you want. We want to apply the seed uniformly. Again, using the rotary spreader, apply it in 2 different directions if you can, which sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. The rate's going to be super important on tall fescue. This here is really too heavy. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this area here, that's probably what you need. So this other areas here, that's too many seed. So, you know, for a bare ground like this, we're looking at 6 to 8 pounds per 1,000 square feet, which is probably about what this is. Because the tall fescue is a clump forming grass, most of these seed here will just get choked out by other seed that germinate. So that's really, you just wasted some money here. You put out too much seed. You don't really need that much at all. So it's kind of hard to avoid putting out too much seed, but you're trying to still stay with that 6 to 8 pounds per 1,000 on bare ground. And if you're doing overseeding, core aerating, aerating in 3 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet still is a gracious plenty of seed. Okay, once our seed's out, then ideally that you would water these newly seeded areas if you can. Now, the seed will lay there until it rains, but really you want to try to go ahead and irrigate if you can to get this seed to germinate and get established before it gets really, really cold. So the situation here is with new seed, you want to water it lightly. You don't need to water very long at all. Just need to have like the upper, say, inch of the ground wet just to keep that soil moist where the seed is. I don't know that 2 or 3 times a day I would do that. I'd say once a day is probably still okay. You just want to make sure you got enough water there to keep the upper part of the soil moist, to keep the seed moist so it goes ahead and germinates. And so then what you want to do there, so maybe once a day you're kind of watering, getting the seedlings to germinate. Once they emerge, then you want to start cutting back. So instead of watering once a day, you go maybe once every 2 days, but then you water for a longer period of time. So we're trying to moisten the soil down deeper. So, watering every day, the grass germinates. And we go every other day or every third day, water for a longer period of time to get the soil moist down deeper, because we're trying to encourage deep roots. If you keep on doing light watering all along, then the roots don't have any to work, and they'll stay very shallow, and you won't have a very good established turf. So as you're going forward, you water less and less frequently, but longer, in order to get the soil moist a little bit deeper. Okay, hard to see here. Those yellow arrows are showing that they have catch cans out there. So a short, straight-sided, like a tuna fish can or some kind of a can like that, you can set those out there and actually collect the water over a certain period of time to give you an idea of what your precipitation rate is on your sprinkler. So, you're trying to go for ideally about 1 inch of water per week. And so you can put these cans out there and see, in a 30 minutes time, how much water you collect in these cans. And that gives you a real good idea of how long you need to run your sprinkler. It's a fairly simple process, but it helps you going forward as to knowing how long to run your sprinkler to be most efficient on your irrigation. And we do want to make sure we run it for the right amount of time. So if you run it too long, you end up with runoff going out over the curb and down the road. We don't want to do that. So you may have to run it for a short period of time, let that soak in, run it again. You may have to go through the cycle 2 or 3 times to get the amount of water you need without having runoff run down the road. Okay, so we're looking at renovation here, and you got a place where you got brown patch disease that killed, say half of the front yard at that point in time. You've really got kind of a problem to have decent looking turf. So the thing to do here is spray it all out. So you've killed everything that's there. So the existing turf and the weeds, everything has been killed out there. You come back, till it all up, and then sow new grass, and you end up with really good quality grass there done, in September, October time frame. Got the guy with the tractor there. He's tilling up with the PTO tiller, coming back with the hand tiller, really doing a good job of breaking the soil up to make a good seed bed to grow good grass. Here's a shot there for the side yard there. Same kind of thing. You've got real patchy grass, you got weeds. It just doesn't look good at all. Go in there, till all this stuff up, and then you can have pretty nice standing grass there. The downside is it makes your neighbors a little bit unhappy when you've got, a really nice stand of green fescue there, and their yard is mostly chickweed and crabgrass, but that's okay. They can fix theirs too. All right, so we'll move into weeds real fast. So crabgrass, there's a lot of crabgrass out there now. Mostly it's going to be in sort of thin areas. Goosegrass is also fairly common weed you'll see at this time of year. So you can use a pre-emergence probably in mid-February. A couple of different products here, Barricade and Pendulum. So the tricky part is that, you know, if you overseed in the fall, this new grass has to be established before you can put down these pre-emergence to avoid damage to the fescue. So, you know, if you get down your fescue in September, you water it, it gets established, you know, by the end of September, October, November, you can put down your pre-emergent in February and be fine. But you've got to look at the label to see, you know, what's the restriction? Is it 60 days? Is it mow the new grass 4 times? You need to make sure your tall fescue is well established before you put these down, because you can run into some damage if you put down your pre-emergent before the tall fescue is established. Now, what I will tell you, and we talked about mowing heights earlier, is that if you're mowing your tall fescue really short, like an inch height, you could have probably 80% coverage with crabgrass. The crabgrass seed needs sunlight for the seed to germinate. And so if you're mowing tall fescue at 3.5 inches, you may only have a 5 to 10% infestation of crabgrass, just for the fact that you got a real tall, thick stand of tall fescue. Sunlight can't get to the soil surface. The crabgrass seed can't germinate. So a good cultural control there to control some of the crabgrass just by mowing height. And you can sort of see here along the edge of the sidewalk, that's crabgrass. And so that's an area where the sunlight gets down to the soil along the edge of the sidewalk there. Really very little crabgrass out in the yard where it's been mowed at, say, 3.5 inches there. You just got it along the edge of the sidewalk. So you could still do a pre-emergent in February, or to save some chemicals, you could come back and do a post-emergent spray just on that edge of that sidewalk, you know, once the crabgrass starts coming up in the springtime. They do have these crabgrass preventers. You know, that's okay, but you've got to get that out early enough. So probably mid-February is the time to put that out. Once the soil temperature reaches, say, 55 degrees, it'll start to germinate. So earlier is better on these pre-emergents. So there are post-emergent herbicides, so Claim, Trimec Plus will control crabgrass and goosegrass. So if you have a situation where the crabgrass is just along the sidewalk, you don't need to put out a pre-emergent over the whole entire yard. You can just come back with a post-emergent spray as this stuff comes up in the spring, control it very well, and save yourself a little bit of money on products. For those of you who have Bermudagrass in your yard, so there is a protocol for Bermudagrass suppression. So it's a combination of a Claim and Turflawn, or Fusilade and Turflawn, that you can go through there. So it's not, they won't say Bermudagrass control. What you're trying to do is suppress it enough that the tall fescue will outcompete it. So the Bermudagrass is going to be there. If you do this, it's going to keep the Bermudagrass from taking over the tall fescue. So if it's growing in from your neighbor's yard, and these products are selective, so it won't hurt the tall fescue, but it will suppress Bermudagrass. So you can come back through here, spray Bermudagrass on this schedule, June, July, August, September, hold back the Bermuda without harming the tall fescue, and it works pretty well. We'll talk about winter annual weeds here. So we're going to start to see these fairly soon as we have a little bit cooler temperature. So we've got Henbit's going to come up pretty quick. Common chickweed's going to come up pretty quick. They do have these weed and feed products that are advertised to use on these. The trick with these is the weeds have to be wet for these granular materials to stick to the weed leaves. So that's a little bit tricky. You don't really get as good a control as what you may want. It is easier to do because you just put it out with a spreader versus spraying, but you're not going to have as good a control with these things because you've got to get it out at a time when the leaves are wet, where these things will stick to the weed leaves. Your other option is to do a post-emergent spray. So Trimex, Speed Zone. Again, you still got to look at, does this new grass have to be mowed 3 times or twice or whatever to make sure you don't hurt your tall fescue. So you're overseeding tall fescue in September. You've got to get that tall fescue established before you can apply these products, but you do want to get them out as fast as you can. If you wait until, say, February, March, when these things have flowered and made 10,000 seeds, you've got the problem coming back again next year. So you really want to get on the yard as early as you can to control these weeds before they get up and flower. But you got to wait until after the tall fescue gets fairly well established. So that's a lot of information in a really short period of time there, and just trying to give you just some things to think about as you're starting to think about your lawn and how to look at labels and buy products. And as always, Chris and I are all glad to help you, work through a soil test report or give you more recommendations on, the grass seed and other products like that. So I mean, it's a very complicated procedure to get a good lawn going, but we're definitely here to help you. So Chris, if anybody has any questions in the chat box, we'll work on answering those, or they can just call us later.
Right. There's a couple of questions. One that are we still driving soil samples to Raleigh, or do we have to mail them?
You have to mail those. So we are not going to Raleigh, and I don't know the way our situation is. We probably won't go to Raleigh again anytime before Thanksgiving. So at this point in time, your best bet is to get the boxes here and mail them yourself, because there's no way for us to take them.
Okay, next question. I've seen some high nitrogen fertilizers that come with iron and some that come with sulfur. Which would we choose for which conditions?
Okay, so it depends on the soil pH some. So typically we don't have a lot of iron deficiencies, but it doesn't hurt to have some iron in there. Some of the high nitrogen fertilizers with sulfur, the sulfur is a coating, so it may be a sulfur coated urea. So urea by itself, if you put that out, it'll volatilize and just go up to the atmosphere. They'll have that sulfur on there to keep it from volatilizing. The sulfur will push your pH down a little bit, so you may need to add some extra lime, but there's nothing wrong with a sulfur-coated fertilizer.
Okay, creeping red has been recommended for shade. What do you think about that?
It's okay, but I would not do just creeping red. So I want a combination, a mixture, if you will, of Kentucky bluegrass, fine fescue, creeping red. The more different types of seeds you have in there, the better you're going to be. Because if you have some spot somewhere where the creeping red is not happy, if you just have creeping red, then you've got bare places. If you've got a mixture, you've got other seed there that may be happy in that particular spot, and you're sort of hedging your bets on what's going to do well.
All right, there's a question here. Is there a calendar available for when to control weeds and fertilize?
Yes, so we do have a tall fescue lawn maintenance calendar. So if you send me or Chris an email, then we can send you the link to that publication.
Barbara Taylor just sent the link.
Oh, bingo.
In the chat. So
hey.
I can actually include that in the that link in the description on YouTube when we post this. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah. The thing
also, there's another question here that is a little confusing. It says, "Is there a similar presentation recorded for cool season lawns?" Well, this will be recorded.
This is cool season, right? Yeah, we
and
don't
it
have
will be
anything
recorded.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so and Barbara's link has calendars for different grasses, and that's all the questions
Okay.
so far, unless anybody else has anything else. Okay.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
like I said, you certainly can call or email us, whatever, with your questions. Because I mean, like I said, it's a lot to go through in a short period of time, and but we're glad to help you any way we can.
We're here. Thanks a lot, Mark, and thanks for coming, everybody. We'll be
All
up
right.
on YouTube shortly.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.